From the minds of Fabian Nicieza and Scott Lobdell came one of the most ambitious crossover events where the stakes were so high, Professor Charles Xavier had to get up from his wheelchair, and it all happened in the 1993 Marvel event called Fatal Attractions. If you've been following the Disney Plus show X-Men 97, buckle up, or rather, suit up for a lot of, hey, I've seen this. For instance, this was the event where Wolverine lost his adamantium and became his most feral version. So let's dive right into it. Acolytes again. In his ready room, Professor Charles Xavier is analyzing and processing data from Cerebro. He's been isolating himself in the room for quite some time now, which is pretty evident from his growing unkempt beard. His strong telepathic powers combined with an incredibly sharp mind allows him to read data quickly and gauge the situation. Yet again, this puts him in the uncoveted position of lone witness to the beginning of the end of the world. The professor is interrupted by Bishop, who expresses his desire to leave the X-Men. He's quite quickly shut down by Charles, who reminds him of his tenacity. Bishop, now resolved to try harder, turns to leave and is asked to pass on instructions to Storm, aka Aurora Monroe, to make arrangements for travel into the city. At the Our Mother of the Sacred Heart School, Sharon Friedlander has been working undercover as a school nurse to protect a latent mutant. She's ambushed by mysterious assailants and called a flat scan as they stand over a body. At the Xavier School for Gifted Youngsters, training is underway for the recruits Bishop and Gambit. Jean Grey and Archangel, aka Warren Worthington III, conduct the training, substituting Storm, who's out for the day. Bishop and Gambit are presented with the simple goal of reaching Jean across the room without using their mutant powers. Archangel is to stand in their way and use holograms. He makes multiple copies of himself to throw them off. Training begins as the two blow through the holograms to reach their goal. In Central Park, Detective Charlotte Jones is out for a run. She's been working in the homicide department of the Manhattan City Police, and save for the fact that she's sticking her neck out to help mutants, her life's going pretty well. She meets with Professor X and Storm and hands him an autopsy report. The detective rightfully asks Professor X whether she's being mind-controlled or is acting out of her own volition. Storm tries to shut her down, but Professor X tells Jones that she can never truly know and that she just have to blindly trust him. Jones, not entirely reassured, but impressed by his honesty, stops the interrogation. Professor X telepathically detects Sharon's final call for help and realizes she's in grave danger. Meanwhile, at the Xavier's Institute, Bishop and Gambit are quite close to their goal as Archangel makes futile attempts to stop them. Just as they're about to reach Jean, Professor X psionically calls on them for a mission. The mutants rush to the hangar and prepare to save the lives of those who both fear and hate them. Meanwhile, at the Our Mother of the Sacred Heart School, as the school bus pulls in, the driver wonders why there's no one waiting outside to take the kids in and notices the unusual quietness of the school. He stops the bus, much to the surprise of one of the children, who asks him whether they should get down so far from the school's entrance. He slowly backs up the bus, suspecting foul play, and worries about the consequences, hoping Friedlander would cover for him if caught. An explosion ensues as the school is blown up, and as the dust settles, we're introduced to the Acolytes, a fanatical religious cult of mutants who took it upon themselves to carry on Magneto's supposed legacy of a genetic cleansing. They're taking a page out of the X-Men's book and trying to recruit young mutants with latent powers into their ranks. As one of the Acolytes named Eric preemptively flies toward the school bus carrying the mutant, he's shot down by the bus driver. A battle breaks out between the Acolyte Carmella and the driver, Tom Corsi. He's just about to be killed by Carmella when the X-Men drop in as Gambit tells Bishop to let loose and disregards Storm's advice of controlling himself in battle. Jean says she thought the Acolyte ceased to exist after Magneto died. Acolyte Cargill, aka Frenzy, attacks them, saying they should be fighting together against their common enemy following in the footsteps of Magneto. Jean recognizes her and realizes the Acolytes have been recruiting members from other evil mutant groups. Archangel is shot down by the Acolytes as Jean looks on, and the Acolytes try once again to get the X-Men to join them. Furious, Jean unleashes her powers and destroys Carmella's psionic exoskeleton, and reminds the Acolytes that their god Magneto, although cruel, would never hurt children. As two twin Acolytes start merging to defeat the X-Men, Jean asks Bishop whether he can absorb the power from their plasma blasts, and Gambit rushes to save the children in the school bus. Cargill follows him, assuming he's running away from battle, and tells them that mutants shouldn't be afraid of humans. Gambit uses his powers to defeat Cargill as Carmella realizes the X-Men's true worth. She telepathically detects their latent mutant and uses her exoskeleton to extract him from the bus. Realizing he has Down syndrome, the Acolytes reject him, much to Archangel's ire, who lectures them on how Magneto and his family suffered similar prejudices. They let the child go, and the twin acolytes shoot a plasma blast to kill all the children. Gambit uses his powers to create a safe passage for Archangel to fly the kids out of the bus. Jean smells leaking fuel and is worried about the impending explosion if the roaring fire reaches the fuel tank before the children are safe. With a clap of thunder as loud as an explosion, Storm arrives and uses her weather-controlling powers to put out the fire with rain. The acolytes have now left, as Gambit and the X-Men worry about the future of both mutant kind and humankind. That night, the news reports the devastation at the Our Mother of the Sacred Heart School, with witnesses stating they saw X-Men safeguarding the children from attacks by the acolytes. Senator Robert Kelly, who chairs the Committee on Mutant Affairs, has visited the area and in a press conference urges the general public to mobilize and come together to deal with the mutant problem. Hot topic. Forge and Henry Gyrick are working together in Kuwait to investigate the remains of Magneto's space station, Asteroid M. The pieces of the asteroid have remained intact, and that makes Forge wonder whether they were manipulated masterfully through Earth's atmosphere. The duo enter the space station to investigate further. They make their way into a room and come across a shocking sight. The statue, like dead bodies of the acolytes Anne-Marie and Delgado, were turned toward the dismantled armor of Magneto, their guard. The suit is empty. Where could its wearer be? At the ABC News studio in New York City, Jean accompanies the professor as he prepares to debate Senator Kelly and Graydon Creed, the leader of the mutant-hating pro-human group, the Friends of Humanity, FOH, on live television. At St. Mary's Boys' Home, Archangel arrives to put Teddy Watson, the boy the acolytes attempted to kidnap but rejected because he had Down syndrome, to sleep. After a brief conversation with the nun in charge, who turns out to be a mutant ally, Archangel asks her to pray for them all. The debate is underway as Creed advocates for human lives matter, while Senator Kelly argues the US government's resolution to safeguard the rights of all its citizens. He also points out that the mutant faction, the X Factor, is regulated by the government. Professor X agrees with Kelly's point of the FOH's bigotry toward mutants. The host asks Professor X whether the FOH's actions are justified in the light of the rise of innumerable pro-mutant groups like the Brotherhood of the Evil Mutants and the Mutant Liberation Front. Professor X hits back at the media for focusing on only the actions of a part of the mutant population and reminds the host of the numerous times his X-Men have saved the world. Moreover, the mutants who chose to get on with their lives normally live in fear of persecution by organizations like the FOH. Creed calls on Senator Kelly for a comment bringing up the death of his wife at the hands of mutants. Annoyed at his personal life being dragged into the debate, Kelly argues he's not driven by revenge to commit genocide and get rid of all mutants. While he wishes to regulate their actions, he doesn't wish the regulation to come at the cost of their freedom and rights as American citizens. Professor X tries to make a point about the recent repeal of the Mutant Registration Act and is interrupted by Creed, who says that groups like the FOH need to exist to counter threats to human beings. The Upstarts, a group of supervillains who participated in a game amongst themselves to kill the most number of mutants, are watching the debate, as one of them is furious at Creed's membership of the Upstarts. Fabian Cortez, the leader of the Acolytes, questions Creed's worth as he boasts about killing Magneto, who's considered the strongest mutant himself. He's quickly shut down by Fitzroy, another member who reminds him that rulership of the Upstarts is temporary. As the two exchange words, Shinobi Shaw intervenes, reminding them that the Upstarts is just a game they invented for fun and to escape the humdrum of amassing wealth and power. The games master enters agreeing with Shaw and scolds Fitzroy and Cortez for acting like spoiled brats. He reminds them of the prize that the leader would receive, the resources and unquestioned loyalty of the remaining Upstarts. Cortez asks him to stop recruiting more members, and he agrees, stating that the new mutant Fitzroy's grooming would be the last member of the Upstarts. Back at the news studio, the host Elton recounts the latest attack on Professor X's life last month. He asks the professor whether he'd rather be martyred for a cause that isn't even his. Professor X tells Elton that life in a world where one is too scared to help another, just because it doesn't directly affect him, is scarier than death. He further points out that the cause is his, and he need not be a direct victim to understand something is wrong and take a stand against it. He rues the day people limit themselves to only helping their kind and ignore the others. Senator Kelly expresses his agreement with the professor's points as Creed points out that their naivety in wanting a utopian world when reality is so grim. Professor X points out that they should deal with the situation together rather than fight amongst themselves. Elton announces a break in the introduction of a new mutant guest via satellite who's been an Avenger and is known across the world as one of the brightest and smartest minds in biochemistry. At Xavier's school, Peter Rasputin, aka Colossus, is watching the news debate and sketching the faces of the professor, Senator Kelly, and Creed. He's quietly contemplating his place in the X-Men, as his powers of turning flesh into steel, while they've saved countless lives, were of no use when it came to saving his brother and parents. Ilyana Rasputin enters and she's down with a bad cough. He asks her why she's up, as he tucked her into bed. She tells him she dreamt he left her, taking their parents and brother with him. Colossus promises her he'll always be there for her, as that's his duty as her elder brother. She hands him a handmade card that reads, "I love Peter," hoping she didn't mess up the spelling. Colossus hugs her, reassuring her that he'll always be by her side, no matter what. The debate is back on as Elton introduces Dr. Henry McCoy, aka Beast, who's probably one of the few mutants accepted worldwide. He greets the rest of the guests and insults Creed with a Nazi salute, making his feelings clear from the word go. He interrupts Creed as he tries to make a point and keeps insulting him. Beast points out that there's no actual way of detecting mutants, and when Creed tries to counter this point, Beast rebuts by blowing raspberries at him as the professor puts his head in his hands. Beast looks proud of himself for doing what he did on national television, and the mutants gathered at Harry's hideaway, watching, cheer on Beast. While Bishop tries to understand the significance of Beast's actions, he's distracted by a waitress who he knows, but can't quite recognize. The mutants toast to the professor's new career as a TV personality, and Beast setting the mutant movement backwards. Storm makes a toast to the dead, mutants who have fought with them, allies who have supported them, and their enemies who could have done so much good with their mutant powers, and to the future. The debate ends as the host thanks his guests, and as the cameras cut out, Professor X and Senator Kelly shake hands. Jean, who's looking on, contemplates the fact that this ushers in a new era of mutant-human relations. She telepathically hears someone telling her that the senator isn't a bad guy. As she tries to ascertain the mutant communicating with her, she realizes it's the senator's aide. Jean wonders whether a mutant by Kelly's side is a good idea or not. As the professor and Kelly were shaking hands, Kelly had invited him over for dinner. Professor X took a rain check, saying he's off with his students to France, and when Jean asks him why they're going to France, the professor tells her he's been telepathically connected to Cyclops, who's getting the Blackbird ready and making the arrangements to take the fight to the Acolytes. Wolverine insisted on joining them, and Dr. Moira McTaggart would fly in from Genosha to help them. X-Men Gold to the rescue. Excalibur's leader, Kurt Wagner, aka Nightcrawler, has been called in by the Professor. He contemplates whether he should be annoyed by the Professor telepathically calling him, providing him with coordinates and expecting him to drop everything to come help. Sighing, he concludes that an X-Man is never off duty as he's suddenly confronted by Forge, the inventor, who uses a gun with confinement tech to trap Nightcrawler and check his mutant signature. Nightcrawler tries to assure him he is who he says he is, but Forge isn't convinced. He then uses his mutant powers to teleport out of the encasement and appears behind Forge. Convinced, Forge tells him to relay a message to the Professor when he arrives. There's an unusual dead zone for 60 miles along the northern coastline of France that even Cerebro can't infiltrate. Forge hands Nightcrawler a portable booster for Cerebro that'll help penetrate the dead zone and pick up any mutant signatures. As he turns to leave, Kurt asks him to stay and fight, as Forge reminds him he's not an X-Man anymore and doesn't believe in the dream of human-mutant coexistence. As he flies off, Kurt contemplates that dreams are windows into the future and that the only constant in life is change. Armed with the device Forge gave him, he hopes to find the new mutant that could be the key to their shared dream. As the Gold Team arrives in France to meet up with Dr. McTaggart, they're met with horror. What was supposed to be a beautiful house by the countryside is now engulfed in smoke and fire. Storm conjures up a storm to put out the fire, preventing it from spreading as Wolverine informs the others that McTaggart is still alive as he didn't get the smell of burning flesh from the building. They're soon confronted by human protesters who ask them to leave as they believe the X-Men caused the fire. Professor X de-escalates the situation, telling the humans they'll depart as the protesters walk away. Of course, the X-Men haven't left. Professor X just used his powers of mind control to make them see what he wanted them to see. He recalls the time he first told McTaggart about his wish to open a school for mutants and showed her the file of the first batch of his students, the X-Men. He clarified the X in X-Men didn't stand for his initials, but the X factor in their genes that makes them stand out from humans. As it turns out, the Acolytes have kidnapped Dr. McTaggart and are holding her at their base, the Mont Saint Francis Monastery. One of them, named Milan, is using his powers to extract her memories and convert them into images to learn more about Magneto. The acolyte Amelia Vogt questions this method of torture when they can just as easily murder the Doctor and exact revenge for what she did to Magneto. Cortez shuts her down for opposing him and reminds her that they need the Doctor alive. As Vogt and Cortez argue about the fate of Dr. McTaggart, an acolyte called Neophyte walks in with food for the prisoner and internally monologues how his leaders conveniently failed to follow Magneto's idea of being kind even to one's enemies. As the X-Men fly in to meet up with Nightcrawler, Colossus checks up on his sister as Bobby Drake, aka Iceman, tries to assure him. Colossus is having none of it as he tells Bobby that Illyana is the only family he has left and that Bobby couldn't even fathom the loss he suffered and what he's going through. The X-Men have reports of an aircraft flying through Middleborough a couple of days ago and suspect that it was the Acolytes escaping. While Cerebro has been able to ascertain the Acolytes' general location, he couldn't pinpoint it exactly thanks to the cloaking technology they used. Back at the Acolytes base, Vogt and Cortez are still arguing about the prisoner. Cortez points out that they could use McTaggart to convert mutants to their cause, and he's dangerously close to a holding cell. He makes grand claims of following in Magneto's footsteps and protecting mutants from humans, as McTaggart yanks his hair from behind, cryptically reminding him that she's witness to him murdering Magneto on Asteroid M. Furious at McTaggart's actions and scared of being ousted, Cortez instructs Vogt to call on Milan to extract her memories and leave her for dead. Once again, the Neophyte enters as McTaggart asks him for help. Neophyte tells her he's not allowed to speak to her as she keeps talking and reveals the truth about the events on Asteroid M. She tells him that Cortez left Magneto and the others to die as he made his escape and would do the same with the rest of the Acolytes. Neophyte covers his ears from the blasphemy and uses his powers to dissolve into the ground. Meanwhile, the X-Men Archangel and Bishop are flying over the rainy Paris sky. Archangel tells Bishop that he's been effective in getting the Professor to change his methods and go on the offensive. Bishop thanks him for the compliment and asks to be let go as they land. Bishop notices the monastery and is convinced that the Acolytes are hiding there given its convenient location. Back at the Acolytes' base, Cortez calls on the Games Master to gather the rest of the upstarts as he needs their help. The Games Master reminds him that while he may have accrued the most points till date, the game is not yet over, and he'd have to make do with the Acolytes for the time being. Cortez reminds him that his leadership of the Acolytes is solely based on the false assumption that he's Magneto's chosen heir after his death. If the Acolytes somehow uncovered the truth, they wouldn't think twice before attacking him. The Neophyte, who's literally the ears in the walls, overhears this and morphs through the wall, saying he hoped the prisoner was lying. Cortez is furious at the Games Master for setting him up and tries to kill the Neophyte. Cortez has the power to intensify another mutant's power to the maximum, and for the Neophyte, who has the power to teleport through solid mass, this means certain death as he's shot out of the Acolyte's base into the muddy and wet ground. X-Men vs. Acolytes. As the rest of the X-Men assemble outside the monastery and question Bishop's information, the Professor informs them that Cerebro has picked up an unidentified mutant signature nearby. As Neophyte comes to, a woman approaches him, and before she can get him up, Cortez's private guards murder her. They confront Neophyte and accuse him of working with the enemy. He's to be escorted back to base and answer to Cortez. Neophyte asks them why they killed her, as she didn't pose a threat to their lives. One of the Acolytes, Saga, paralyzes him using his psionic whip, reminding him that all humans everywhere are a threat to mutant kind, and that only one of them can survive. Saga whip calls around Neophyte's neck as he's being dragged back into the monastery. Saga addresses the dead woman, telling her to use caution the next time she's helping someone, as she'll never know about the company and trouble they'll bring. In a very hoot-worthy moment, Wolverine arrives, slicing the psionic rope in three, and agrees with Saga, who's rendered unconscious. Wolverine ridicules Saga for getting knocked out, as the Acolyte Spore runs at him, determined to exact revenge on his fallen friend. Iceman arrives, slamming a block of ice on Spore. The rest of the Acolytes retreat with their tails between their legs. Neophyte meets with the X-Men and is still reeling from the shock of their actions. He refuses to believe that Magneto, who was raised in a Nazi concentration camp, would propagate the same unreasonable hate that he was a victim of. Professor X offers him the chance to make a difference with the X-Men. Cortez is furious the X-Men discovered their hiding spot and decides to send them a message by killing McTaggart. The X-Men enter just at the right time along with Neophyte as Nightcrawler kicks Cortez in the face. A battle ensues as the X-Men engage in casual banter amongst themselves before Jean reminds them of the fight before them. Milan is just about to attack McTaggart and extract her memories as Archangel kills him. Bishop notices Cortez running away as Archangel is attacked by the Acolyte Unuskione's telepathic exoskeleton. A lot of the Acolytes seem to have telepathic powers at this point and is rendered almost lifeless. Colossus is attacking another Acolyte as Unuskione ambushes him. He breaks free of her psionic grip with ease and knocks her down. Just as he's about to finish her off, Nightcrawler calls out to him as he notices a pair of Acolytes approaching Nightcrawler, clutching the body of an injured Archangel. Cargill and Iceman are fighting as she calls him pathetic and weak. Iceman grows in size and punches Cargill with a huge ice fist. Scott Summers, aka Cyclops, deals with another Acolyte, reminding him the X-Men are fighting for both human and mutant lives, and one isn't greater than the other. Jean runs to Moira's side as Acolyte Seamus Mellencamp approaches her, promising to be her worst nightmare, as she unleashes her full psionic powers, blasting Mellencamp into the Pyrenees Mountains. She takes McTaggart to their jet, the Blackbird, for medical help. The battle is over as Cyclops realizes Professor X and Bishop are missing. The Professor telepathically assures him he's all right and asks him to check on Bishop, who's on a small tower on the monastery's roof. He approaches Amelia Vogt, who's praying. The two exchange words owing to their shared history, and the massacre of her loved ones by humans. She's made an altar of Magneto's helmet, surrounded by candles as the professor tries to ask her where it came from. Vogt teleports away as Cortez is waiting on the tower to make his escape. Bishop yanks at his feet and pulls him down through the roof of the tower as the two begin fighting. Cortez uses his powers to amplify Bishop's powers, rendering him unconscious. Neophyte emerges from the ground and attacks Cortez. Cortez punches him and is just about to enhance his powers when Wolverine intervenes and digs his claws into Cortez. As the X-Men wait for Blackbird, Professor X offers Neophyte the chance to accompany them. Neophyte rejects his offer temporarily and vanishes into the night, telling the professor that Magneto's and his own dream might be more similar than they realize. Cortez is writhing in pain after Wolverine's attack, and Vought is trying to heal him. He expresses his annoyance at having to wait in the hospital for a week before being teleported out, as she reminds him she couldn't risk moving him while he was recovering. As Vought sarcastically tells him she doesn't want to be accused of murdering the chosen leader, Cortez tries reminding her of her place. She walks away as the Games Master appears, and Cortez thinks he's getting good news. Points for killing Bishop, and he's going to emerge as the leader of the upstarts. The Games Master informs him that Bishop is still alive and that all the points he's gathered would be taken away. The Games Master fades away, leaving him to piece together the puzzle as Cortez horrifically realizes Magneto is still alive. At the Xavier Institute, Dr. McTaggart and Professor X are in his ready room as he's studying the molecular structure of a new virus. They soon put the pieces together, as Moira recounts noticing similar symptoms in the mutants of Genosha. She asks the professor whether pain and suffering will always be a part of a mutant's destiny. He remembers Strife using the word legacy in his files, and realizes the virus is the legacy virus that Strife unleashed, and asks Moira whether she can tell him more about the virus. Moira tells the professor that everyone who's contracted the disease has died and there's no cure for it. All the while, Colossus is watching over his sister Illyana, whose health keeps deteriorating. Mutants, they're just like us. Get ready for what's possibly one of the most human X titles. Uncanny X-Men Volume 1, issue number 303A is probably the closest thing to Professor X's dream of harmonious coexistence, as it beautifully portrays a sense of helplessness and grief. Jean walks into the professor's ready room in search of Jubilee, sensing the young mutants need to talk. As Jubilee sarcastically says that she knows that the room is out of bounds and she should use the danger room to mope, all the while creating plasma fireworks out of her palms, Jean assures her that she just wanted to check on Jubilee after everything that's happened. Jubilee tells Jean that she can sum up her feelings in 2 words: life sucks. As Jean responds that, sometimes it does, and asks Jubilee whether she'd like to talk about it. Jubilee asks her if talking would change anything. As Jean and Jubilee keep talking about the feelings, Jubilee recounts the events. The Xavier Institute, also known as the X-Mansion, was quiet as the X-Men were away on a mission. In the med lab, Dr. Moira McTaggart and the professor were trying to figure out a way to help Illyana Rasputin, who'd contacted the deadly legacy virus. As Moira tells the professor that they need a fresh perspective on the girl's condition, Professor X hopes that they'll have something to work on when the Gold Team returns from Dallas with Forge in tow. Jubilee, on the other hand, was keeping Illyana distracted with a Nightcrawler impression, holding Illyana's plushie of the Indigo Mutant, when Kitty Pryde, aka Shadowcat, came in with fresh linen. Illyana asked Kitty for news of her brother, as Kitty told her to rest up and that Peter would be back soon. Back in the present, Jubilee confesses to Jean that she could have shown a little less attitude, but she's kind of annoyed at Kitty for showing up out of the blue. Also, she doesn't understand how a 7-year-old girl could be friends with a teenager like Kitty. Jean shows Jubilee the older Illyana, aka Magic, and tells her how the two became the best of friends, fighting by each other's side after Illyana was aged up with fully developed mutant powers by the assassin, Arcade. Back in the past, Jubilee, feeling useless, approached the professor for words of encouragement and asked about the condition of the little mutant girl. The shadow of pain on the professor's face told Jubilee all she needed to know. The professor couldn't understand how and why the virus affecting Illyana is acting so rapidly. Jubilee figured the professor felt like a father who's about to lose his kid and is frantically looking for a way to save her. Jubilee went back to Illyana's room to see Kitty by her bedside, as Shadowcat invited her in. The 3 girls laugh, giggle, and awesomely act their ages for the first time in forever. Meanwhile, in the med bay, the professor got an update from Storm as the team would return the following morning. Illyana goes into sudden respiratory arrest as her lungs shut down, making her cough up blood. Moira informs the mutants that the infection is not only devouring Illyana's mutant genes, but her human ones as well. The professor puts on a questionable Shi'ar helmet on her head, rendering her comatose as Moira vehemently protests. In all the mayhem, feeling helpless and not being able to do much more, Jubilee takes the Nightcrawler plushie and tucks it back in Ileana's hands. Jubilee sits by Ileana's bed, reading to her, as the rest of them decide to let Ileana pass peacefully. The Gold team arrives as Colossus gets the news of his sister's passing and is disturbed. Jean hugs a crying Jubilee as she reminds her that the beauty of life lies in sharing and learning in the company of others. The Acolytes are attacking an hospice in Virginia, where they're torturing a nurse and randomly killing people in the name of Magneto. They kill patients and medical professionals alike without a care for human lives. The nurse recounts the brutality the Acolytes subjected her to that led to her hospitalization, as she questions the kind of person Magneto is for the Acolytes to carry out such atrocities in his name. Pietro Maximoff, aka Quicksilver, shares the sentiment as the nurse's vitals go haywire and he's asked to leave. As he leaves, an Acolyte follows him closely, reporting back to Cortez, who vows to get Quicksilver to join their ranks. At the Pentagon, the heroes are trying to question their prisoner Spore in hopes to find more information about the Acolytes. Though their efforts yield no success in the beginning, the Acolyte gets down on their knees in reverential after seeing Quicksilver and tells him the Acolyte's next target, Camp Hayden, also serving as the headquarters for the latest Sentinel program. Quicksilver teams up with Val Cooper and Random as the hired muscle and sets off to deal with the Acolytes. The rest of the X-Force as well as the Acolytes follow, and fighting ensues. Cortez asks the Speeder to be the new leader of the Acolytes, as he's the son of Magneto. Quicksilver refuses, as the mutants are shocked to see Sentinel tech. Turns out, Cooper was being mind-controlled by the Acolytes to lead the mutants to the base. As she asks for forgiveness, Quicksilver steps away and remarks that a flat scan will not understand the pain and troubles of a mutant, and walks away. An unexpected guest has concealed themselves within X-Force's headquarters. Upon their return, the team discovers the intruder and disperses to locate them. Despite the intruder incapacitating the entire team, only Cannonball and Boomer manage to identify them as Cable. Apart from Richter and Sunspot, the team rejoices at the return of their leader, previously believed to be dead. Cable manages to mend Richter and Sunspot's hostility towards him by clarifying that although they believed he was responsible for the father's deaths, it was actually Strife who committed those acts. Accepting Cable's explanation, they begin to harbor positive feelings toward him. Later that day, the team is taken aback by the sudden appearance of Exodus, an envoy of Magneto. Following a brief skirmish, Exodus invites Sunspot and Cannonball to accompany him to Avalon to meet Magneto. They agree on the condition that Richter, Boomer, Rusty and Skids can also join. Exodus consents and they depart for Avalon with X-Force. Cannonball's seeming betrayal shocks Shatterstar, leading to doubts about Cannonball's loyalty. However, Cable reveals that before Cannonball left, he secretly attached a communication link to Cable's arm, enabling the rest of the team to track their location. Meanwhile, Exodus leads the team to a familiar location, Cable's old base, Grey Malkin, named after the street the Xavier's mansion is located in. There, they meet Exodus's master, whom they recognize as Magneto. Magneto performs a ceremonial act, laying his hands on Rusty and Skid's heads to remove the implants that Strife had implanted in them. Afterward, they awaken from what feels like a dream, unable to recall their time with the FOH. Magneto then extends an invitation to the team to reside in his newly established home, Avalon. Meanwhile, aboard the interpersonal assault carrier, IPAC, Cable's team reaches the station, causing Cable deep distress as he sees his former base now under the control of a deranged individual. Siren soothes Cable's anxiety, and X-Force gains access to the station. Cable attempts to regain control of Grey Malkin's body slide technology, but Exodus detects their presence and tries to thwart Cable's efforts. Despite Exodus's efforts, Cable successfully overrides the technology and teleports himself, X-Ray, Rusty and Skids to safety. Cable confides in Cannonball about his intention to destroy Grey Malkin, but Cannonball persuades him otherwise, much to Magneto's relief. Despite his inner turmoil, Cable grants Rusty and Skids permission to stay on Avalon, fulfilling their wishes, and transports the rest of X-Force, except for himself, back to the IPAC, headed for Earth. Rushing to Grey Malkin's central core, Cable retrieves the Professor's programming from the station's database. A tense confrontation with Magneto ensues, resulting in Cable sustaining severe damage to his mechanical components. Desperate, Cable requests the Professor to body slide him onto the IPAC, leaving Magneto behind to contemplate his loss. The Acolytes, much to Cortez's misfortune, have discovered his secret and surround him. 4 of them attack him at the same time, and although he manages to use his powers to free himself initially, they keep ganging up on him as he tries to lie his way out and regain his position as their leader. Exodus arrives in all his pink glory, telling Cortez he isn't a stranger in so much as he's the real deal. The Acolytes gang up on Cortez and want to murder him for what he did to Magneto. Exodus convinces them otherwise and tells them to prepare for ascension into the safe haven Magneto has prepared for mutants. Cortez looks on helplessly as Exodus tells him he's going to suffer slowly as the victim of someone else's legacy, hinting at the fact that Cortez might have contracted the legacy virus. On the day of Ileana's burial, Professor Xavier is looking in a mirror and is unable to recognize himself. He feels defeated and recounts all of his actions that led most of his students, the X-Men, to leave any minute semblance of a life behind to join him in his crusade to protect a world that fears and hates mutants. The leader of the Shi'ar Empire, Magistrix Lilandra, tries to comfort the professor via a holographic projection and offers him solace. She tells him she's convinced he tried his best to save the little girl, and as the hologram transmission cuts out, Lilandra assures him he's not alone. Determined to do right by his X-Men, he seeks help from the Mutant Underground, activating the Magneto protocols. The Mutant Underground is a network of mutant spies and informants who keep the professor updated on the latest mutants and mutant activist movements all over the world. At his space station Avalon, Magneto is uncharacteristically talking to himself as he regrets not being able to save all mutants everywhere. He's primed and ready to destroy Earth and all of humanity. It's revealed that he owes his life to the acolyte Chrome, who sacrificed himself so that Magneto could survive his supposed death on Asteroid M. Flashback time. Magneto recalls the death of his first child, Anya. His mutant powers had just manifested and his house caught on fire. All Eric Lensher wanted to do was bury his child, and if he was allowed to do so peacefully that day, the world would probably have never had to face the wrath of Magneto. Back in the present, Magneto puts on his helmet, resolute to make mutant lives better and shake the X-Men awake from Professor X's pipe dream of mutant-human harmony. He proclaims that mutants have suffered long enough and that they need Magneto to prosper. Meanwhile, Shadowcat raids the sparse fridge in the X-Mansion, asking Storm whether the professor has restricted their food intake. Storm reassures her that isn't the case, and they simply haven't had the time to go shopping. Kitty scoffs at this, commenting on how normal the word sounds. She expresses her desire to be normal and thinks that their respective lives would be much better without their mutant powers. Storm disagrees with her, saying she never wished to be normal, and takes Shadowcat flying. She uses her powers to conjure up dark clouds to surround them and explains to Shadowcat that their mutant powers allow them a unique perspective into the world, and like the sun rays peeking out from the dark clouds, every situation, however grim, has a positive side. As the two women fly back down, they see Colossus burning his paintings in a barrel fire. As Kitty tries to talk to him, he shuts her down, telling her he's trying to move on with his life. He hands her one of the paintings, and as Kitty hugs him, she realizes she's hugging a stone-cold, rigid block of metal and not her love interest. She runs away, crying. As Banshee lays out the chairs in preparation for Ileana's funeral, Bishop asks him why a memorial service is required. Following an exchange between the two mutants, Banshee flies away, telling Bishop that while he does believe he's from the future, he doesn't think he's from his future, as that would mean everything that the X-Men strived for all their lives would have been for nothing. Storm gives a moving eulogy in the presence of all the X-Men who are dressed in their respective superhero costumes. As the service concludes, the X-Men exchange hugs in solemnity. As Colossus expresses his anger at the professor, he's interrupted by Magneto, who descends on the gathered X-Men and offers a permanent solution to the atrocities they face at the hands of humans. He informs them of his plans to destroy Earth and all those living on it who don't choose to ascend with him to his safe haven in space, Avalon. The Acolytes soon join him and obviously echo his sentiments. Logan, aka Wolverine, goes to attack Magneto, who's much more powerful than before, as he's tossed aside. Magneto begins to disassemble Professor X's wheelchair as the professor falls to the ground. He paralyzes the mutants, manipulating the iron in their blood, and reminds them he doesn't want to fight. The acolyte Senyaka meets Magneto as Quicksilver reminds him of his crimes against innocent civilians. In order to maintain his twisted sense of order, Magneto wraps Senyaka in his own whip, killing him as the helpless X-Men look on in horror. He brings Avalon down to the Earth's atmosphere and invites Professor X to accompany him, as the professor reminds him his actions are no different than the monsters who persecuted him. Meanwhile, Bishop, who's been absorbing Magneto's powers, unleashes it back, hurling Magneto away. Furious, Magneto stops trying to talk and attacks the X-Men, who band together as Bishop absorbs their collective powers. In the heat of battle, Colossus changes sides. Avalon looms above threateningly. Professor X realizes he'll have to stretch his powers to their limits as he telepathically commandeers himself, Magneto, and Avalon into space. He free falls back down into Earth as Archangel catches him midair, and the X-Men prepare themselves for their biggest battle yet. Adrian Icecolt was a young soldier when his squadron unfortunately came in contact with Magneto. As the only two survivors, him and his brother Oot were fleeing. They came across the tombstone of Magneto's wife. Magneto kills his brother and spares Adrian, who holds a grudge against him. Gabrielle Holler is giving a speech at the Empire State University and talks about Magneto. Given her personal history with the mutant, She feels she's not providing an unbiased lecture. The two meet up in Manhattan to work together and bring Magnus to trial. Exodus approaches the Brotherhood of Mutants to take Eileen back to Avalon, leaving the rest behind. She refuses as Exodus flies away. Meanwhile, Adrian is getting fitted with synthetic tech to take down Magneto. As a revenge-fueled Adrian finally tracks down Magneto to the same tombstone, he changes his mind, looking at Magneto being human as the two go their separate ways, giving it their all. In the White House, the president urgently contacts Boris Yeltsin in Russia, informing him that the UN Security Council has implemented the Magneto protocols. Moments later, Nick Fury stands by as Forge completes the final preparations to initiate the protocols, which he promptly does. At Avalon, the world's actions don't escape Magneto's notice, provoking intense anger within him. Determined, he takes flight toward the center of the barrier the humans have constructed around Earth. Magneto quickly discerns that they've devised a mechanism intended to nullify his powers if he tries to descend to Earth. Magneto focuses his powers, sending a surge of energy through Earth's electromagnetic field, causing widespread chaos by disrupting everything electrical. The resulting turmoil leads to falling planes, whirlwinds, and tornadoes that claim innocent lives globally. At the X-Mansion, Banshee and the Beast utilize the Shi'ar technology within to restore electricity. Meanwhile, Cyclops updates the X-Men on these catastrophic events, prompting Xavier to devise a plan for a surprise attack on Magneto. After heated debates, the X-Men reluctantly consent to Xavier leading the charge. Equipped with new Shi'ar armor that harnesses his mental powers for mobility, he can walk now. Professor X selects Rogue, Gambit, Wolverine, Quicksilver, Jean Grey, and himself for the mission, opting for a smaller team to minimize potential casualties. After bidding their farewells, the 6-member team transports themselves to Avalon, embarking on their mission. Concerned about the station's security, they're pleasantly surprised to find themselves undetected, thanks to Colossus secretly programming the computers to recognize them as allies. Upon meeting Rusty and Skids and navigating to a control room, Professor X dispatches Quicksilver to insert a control disk into the mainframe, granting Professor X control over the station. Professor X commands the station to teleport the acolytes away, ensuring an interference-free confrontation with Magneto. Enraged by the attack, Magneto hunts down the team, initiating attempts to eliminate them individually. Seizing the moment, Professor X and Jean enter Magneto's mind, aiming to show him the reality of his past actions. Despite their efforts in the X-Men's external attacks, Jean halts the mind probe when Wolverine intervenes to save Quicksilver's life from his own father. Injured and on his knees, Magneto retaliates by savagely extracting adamantium from Wolverine's body. Professor X, witnessing the escalating violence, intervenes decisively, severing Magneto's mind from his body. This marks the beginning of the Onslaught Saga. Check out our Onslaught Saga video to know more. Exhausted and immobilized, Magneto is left behind as Xavier explains the drastic measures taken. Soon after, Colossus arrives, informing the team that their teleporters are disabled, but Bishop is en route with a modified Blackbird. Leaving both friend and foe behind, Colossus vows to take care for Magneto until he recovers, uncertain if that will ever come to pass. The X-Men return to Earth after their intense battle against Magneto aboard the Avalon space station, carrying a critically injured Wolverine. Magneto had forcibly removed the adamantium from Wolverine's body, leaving him in a precarious state. To aid Wolverine's recovery, Professor X and Jean Grey delved into his mind using their telepathic abilities. Inside Logan's mind, they navigated through a turbulent stream of memories, encountering vivid scenes from his past. They witnessed a mental projection of Logan under attack by Sabretooth, depicted in a haunting crucifixion on a giant letter X. This surreal representation mirrored the agony he endured when Magneto extracted the adamantium from his body. Their journey through his memories also led them to a chilling flashback of Wolverine's time in the Weapon X program, where adamantium was forcibly fused to his bones. However, Jean began to feel uneasy about their intrusion into Wolverine's deeply personal experiences, ones he hadn't even shared with his closest comrades. Recognizing the violation of privacy, she convinced Professor X to withdraw from Logan's mind, respecting his inner sanctum. As the Blackbird, hastily retrofitted for space travel, re-enters Earth's atmosphere, it encounters mechanical issues unfamiliar with such a re-entry. The main heat shields falter, prompting Bishop, Quicksilver, and Gambit to scramble and stabilize the craft's critical systems, preventing a potential breakup mid-flight. The turbulent descent causes Logan, strapped to a medical table, to jolt violently against a bulkhead, jarring him awake with a howl of pain. Despite his agony, Wolverine's resolve remains unbroken. However, the other X-Men grow increasingly concerned as they witness Logan's healing factor struggle to cope with the extensive injuries inflicted during the ordeal. They face a tense battle to keep Logan stable and buy him enough time to recover before the situation worsens. As the Blackbird hurtles through the atmosphere, Professor X, Jean Grey, and Rogue labor to stabilize Logan while maintaining contact with the X-Mansion, where Moira McTaggart stands ready to guide them through the process. Jubilee, overwhelmed with grief, silently observes the tense scene. With Rogue called away to assist Bishop and Quicksilver, Gambit steps in to support Wolverine. The strain of re-entry causes the Blackbird's wing skin to crack under the intense pressure, forcing Jean to utilize her telekinetic powers to hold it together. Meanwhile, back at the X-Mansion, the remaining X-Men anxiously monitor the unfolding crisis. Professor X, knowing the gravity of the situation, instructs Gambit to closely monitor Logan's fading vital signs as he delves once more into Logan's mind, fighting to keep him alive. Xavier warns Gambit to sever the siling if Logan's condition deteriorates beyond hope, as the death of Logan with the Professor still connected to his mind would spell Xavier's demise as well. It's a race against time as the team works tirelessly to stabilize Logan and prevent the unthinkable from occurring. As Xavier delves deeper into Logan's psyche, he witnesses yet another iteration of Logan's fateful clash with Magneto, unfolding much like it did in reality. Inside this mental realm, Logan, now stripped of his adamantium, teeters on the brink of surrendering to despair. He gravitates toward a radiant light beckoning him, symbolizing a desire to let go. Meanwhile, in the physical world, the Blackbird faces a perilous situation as it navigates through a turbulent storm front between New Jersey and New York, exacerbating the craft's existing damage. Bishop calls on Gambit for assistance to avert a potential catastrophe. Just as he inches closer to embracing the light and relinquishing life's struggles, a spectral presence emerges. It's the spirit of Illyana, intervening to thwart Logan's premature acceptance of death. Despite Logan's initial resistance, Illyana's ethereal form pushes him back, refusing to allow him to succumb to oblivion. In the midst of the escalating chaos aboard the Blackbird, Xavier is compelled to withdraw from Logan's mind, faced with the urgent reality of the storm threatening to tear the aircraft apart. As the turbulent winds wreak havoc on the main hatch, jeopardizing cabin pressure and risking the passengers being sucked into the tempest, Jean springs into action. Using her formidable telekinetic abilities, she strains to seal the hatch against the violent forces assaulting it. Despite Jean's valiant efforts, a bolt of lightning strikes the plane, causing a momentary lapse in her concentration and resulting in the hatch breaking free. In a heart-stopping moment, Jean is pulled out into the storm, clinging desperately to the aircraft for survival. With the lives of her companions hanging in the balance, Jean channels all her mental strength to prevent them from meeting the same fate. Meanwhile, in Logan's mental landscape, he finds himself enveloped in a radiant glow, drawn towards what he initially perceives as a guiding hand from the afterlife. However, as he reaches out, he realizes it's Jean who's in peril, not an ethereal guide. Summoning his remaining reserves of strength, Logan regains consciousness in the physical world, breaking free from his medical confines. With renewed vigor, he rushes to Jean's aid, pulling her back to safety just as the Blackbird begins its descent back to the X-Mansion. Sometime later, Logan discovers that his once robust healing factor has significantly waned. Despite this setback, he insists on testing his capabilities by engaging in a challenging danger room simulation, determined to assess if he still possesses the skills required to be an X-Man, even without his adamantium enhancements. The X-Men observe with a mix of apprehension and concern as Wolverine navigates the danger room, his expression reflecting uncertainty and trepidation. Undeterred, Logan pushes forward, driven by his refusal to yield. To everyone's shock, bone claws suddenly protrude from his hands during the simulation, a startling revelation of his true nature. With his diminished healing factor putting him at risk, Moira McTaggart intervenes, halting the danger room exercise and swiftly transports Logan to the medical facility for urgent care. Later, Logan finds solace in a conversation with Jubilee on the mansion grounds, discussing the startling discovery about his bone claws. The revelation sparks questions about his past and how he remained unaware of this fundamental aspect of himself, even during his pre-Weapon X days. Reflecting on his journey with the X-Men, Logan acknowledges the positive impact they've had on his life, but grapples with uncertainty about his future role, especially given his compromised healing abilities. A moment of realization occurs as he experiences a smoker's cough while enjoying a cigar, prompting him to contemplate giving up smoking as a symbolic step forward. In a poignant turn of events, Logan awakens in the dead of night, compelled to make a life-altering decision. Leaving a heartfelt letter for Jubilee and notes for his fellow teammates, he quietly packs his belongings and sets out on his motorcycle. With a heavy heart, he bids farewell to the X-Mansion, marking the beginning of a new chapter devoid of his X-Men family. As he rides into the night, he embraces the uncertainty of the future, ready to carve out his path and confront the challenges that lie ahead. Excalibur renewed. On Muir Isle, Nightcrawler, Phoenix, and Shadowcat wrapped up their mission by apprehending the last of the escaping prisoners and returning him to the castle. They handed over their captive Spore to Moira's scientist. Shortly after, they were surprised by the arrival of Xavier, Jean, and Scott from the X-Men. Descending from their Blackbird jet, they sought the aid of Nightcrawler's team. The two groups convened in Moira's lab, where Xavier requested Kitty's assistance in persuading Colossus to return to Earth. Xavier expressed concern about Colossus's mental state following an accident that left him permanently trapped in his armored form due to a head injury sustained in battle weeks prior. After much deliberation, Kitty agreed and contacted Avalon, misleading Peter into believing she wanted to join him there. Peter, thinking Kitty had had a change of heart, sought permission from Exodus to travel to Earth, which was reluctantly granted. Meanwhile, at Camp Verde, Cable intercepts the transmission from Muir Isle as Colossus. Seeking revenge on the acolytes who had nearly killed him while he tried to save the professor from Magneto's control, Cable set off for Muir Isle. As preparations for Colossus's arrival were made on the island, the teams discussed recent events in their lives. When Colossus finally arrived, Kitty was heartbroken to witness the betrayal in his eyes as they subdued him. Elsewhere, Rachel Summers engages Cable to prevent him from disrupting their efforts. During their confrontation, Jean underwent an uncontrollable metamorphosis before reverting. Back at the castle, Moira and others managed to heal Colossus's injury. Outside, Nightcrawler encountered 3 acolytes who had come for Colossus. Meanwhile, Phoenix regained consciousness and defeated Cable before rushing to assist Nightcrawler. As Colossus transformed back to his human form and embraced Kitty for comfort, they left the castle to join the others outside. Colossus decided to return to Avalon with the acolytes, bidding farewell to his friends. Cyclops offered Excalibur a ride back to London, but they declined, choosing to remain at Muir Isle to aid Moira's research, which she gladly accepted. Thus, a new Excalibur was born with a renewed purpose. The new Acolytes. The Acolytes have apprehended Neophyte, and his trial is rapidly approaching. Colossus has been appointed as his defender, opposite Amelia Vogt as the prosecutor. Meanwhile, Exodus spends time with the silent Magneto, convinced he speaks for him. He's set on making an example of Neophyte for his betrayal to the X-Men. With little time to prepare, Colossus and Neophyte brace for the trial, presided over by Exodus with other Acolytes forming the jury. Vogt and Colossus present their arguments, while Milan sheds light on Neophyte's acolyte journey. Unuscione, feeling Neophyte's trial is excessive, confronts him over his encounter with Charles Xavier, sparking a skirmish before Exodus intervenes. Exodus, leaning towards Neophyte's execution, is halted by Colossus, citing Neophyte's protective and conflicting actions akin to Magneto's past. Forced to reconsider, Exodus banishes Neophyte instead of executing him. Vogt warns Colossus of his growing estrangement within the Acolytes, while Exodus fears waning control as Magneto observes, perhaps with a smile. Marvelous verdict. Fatal Attractions has been an important part of the X-Men history as it dealt with serious issues like Magneto unleashing his hatred and the X-Men having to fight him tooth and nail. It spawned multiple storylines like the Onslaught Saga and the Feral Wolverine Saga. Both the videos are out on our channel. Check out the videos on our channel. It was also adapted to screen for the first time in the 3-part season finale of X-Men '97.